for us to kind of talk about, kind of what we alluded to there at the beginning, which was, threat intelligence maturity and growth as an industry. And I kind of left this one for one of the larger sections because I feel this would probably be one of the more dynamic conversations that you and I have, right? Is how do we see threat intelligence as an industry, and how do we see threat intelligence kind of growing and maturing over, in the past, how it's done, and over the next few years. And I'll have to say that, when I found these statistics, when I was researching for this, for this segment today, I was really actually pretty shocked at some of the statistics that I found. And I don't necessarily know that I agree with them. And so curious what your thoughts on them from what you're seeing. But, things like, 85% of organizations that were surveyed as part of this survey said they had some form of a cyber threat intelligence or a CTI resource, right? And even 50% of those people who were surveyed had a dedicated team. And I guess the real question I just jumped right into to that with is, like, do you actually feel, since you're in the intelligence business and you talk to folks on a pretty regular basis, do you feel like organizations are taking CTI more seriously now versus at some point in time in the past?
Yeah, well, I think it's an interesting survey. The 85% number suggests some people were pretty liberal in their responses. I think if folks are saying, "Oh yeah, we have some intel," they're getting a lot of leeway in what they're calling intelligence. So
how so? Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I think one of the big challenges I run into regularly, and one of the things I talk to people about, since moving into the private sector, I'm not trying to reinvent intelligence or bring, I'm not trying to brand it. I'm not trying to get rich off of intel. Most of my job is just bringing things from the government space into the private sector. So Joint Publication 2-0, and for anybody who doesn't know what that is, you can Google this. This is readily available. This is unclassified. But JP 2-0, I spent a lot of time talking about. And the simple chart, there's a single chart in there that's kind of a funnel arrow chart. And it talks about, data and information and intelligence. And I think that alone, I could spend significant amounts of time just training the industry on. And I'm not alone. Other people know this. You know this, obviously, too. But I think a lot of folks live in the data world, and they think that's intelligence. And they're sold that as intelligence. So if you're buying from a vendor who says, we're selling you threat intelligence, you can then tell somebody in a survey, oh, yeah, we're definitely doing intelligence, when really you're buying data or you're buying information. And really, really simple. Data, if I give you a large list of IPs or URLs, that's data. If I give you a large list of IPs or URLs and there's a score attached to it, a threat score, that's not intelligence. That's information. That's informed data. I've got to give you that large list of IPs or URLs, with that threat score, but also when it was active, when it was inactive, when it was hostile, what adversaries were associated with it, what were the tactics, techniques, and procedures, what are their motives, what do we think is going to come next? That's intelligence. Very few organizations are actually down that path.
Let me pull in that one real quick. I don't want to interrupt you, but let me pull in that one. And again, just to ask that controversial question, then why haven't those companies been competitively forced out of the business, or why is that still a line item on a quote or a PO for a company? If that is just data.
Yeah, well, I think we're seeing some of that with the maturity in the market. The problem we have, and to be clear, like, the data is needed. So it's not like there's no value. The data and the information are both valuable. I tell people the problem is you buy data and information and you're told it's intelligence. It's like buying bricks and being told you bought a house. It doesn't mean the bricks aren't valuable. You're not building a lot of houses without them, but you just got to know where they fit in the context, right? So I think the reason they're doing well is, first of all, they have massive amounts of this stuff, and it is important. This data and this information matters. There's value to it. So they're not going to go out of business. They're foundational to building intel. But as organizations get smarter and more mature, they're starting to be able to recognize, what am I really buying? What am I really getting? What do I have to do with it? And I think we're starting to see that. I would say in the 5 years now I've been in the private sector, I'd say I've certainly seen maturation. I've seen organizations that understand what the difference is between data, information, and intelligence, and what they need to do to get to intelligence. I would say, though, that 85% number, that just reflects a lot of people who don't understand what intelligence is. They think they're doing intelligence, or they have it, and they just don't.
So let me ask you this: if you're getting a data stream that has a list of IOCs, indicators of compromise for those that are listening, that's going into your security monitoring platform to give you alerts, is that threat intelligence?
No.
Okay.
Not to me, it's not.
It's not. How hard is it for an enterprise to be able to do that themselves?
Well, Obviously, there's some variance in enterprises. That shouldn't be hard, though. I mean, if you want an honest answer, there's a lot of companies that would prefer not to hear that, I'm sure. That shouldn't be remarkably hard, that bit. And there's value in it, certainly. You want to build a smarter security network, smarter, apparatus, which comes with bringing lots of data into it. And again, if you're bringing in those, the IOCs is better, down the track. If they're vetted IOCs, they're scored IOCs, and they're deprecated at a proper time, so you know how long they've been around. The problem with IOCs and anything granular is everything's disposable. It changes so quickly. Most things that you're finding, it's only going to get you so far. You really need to be able to focus on threat actors and groups and motives and the more technical TTPs that are harder to tactics, techniques, and procedures, for those who don't know the term, that are harder to change from. Adversaries have a tendency, they have motives that don't change very often. And when they build tactics, techniques, and procedures, they're human beings. So they tend to do the same things over and over again. If I've got a tactic that works really well and I run it, through multiple organizations, I'm successful, and I get to your organization and I fail, it's more likely I'm just going to move to the next organization with the same tactic than I'm going to try to create a whole new tactic to get into your organization. Unless I specifically need what you have, I'm just going to move on to the next company. So I think that's where you need to look. The IOCs themselves, they change too often. I can change infrastructure that I'm using, and I can change the tool I'm using. There's a lot of things I can do as an adversary, and I'm not an adversary, obviously, but to change myself in those simple areas there. So the IOCs are just very transitive, I think.
Let me pick on the threat actor one, because I think this is an interesting conversation. As a matter of fact, I just had this conversation today with a pretty large endpoint protection vendor that I won't name. Sure. but they talk about attribution and using threat intelligence. They were trying to obviously sell me at this particular time, some threat intelligence stuff. And the conversation that they wanted to have me was, but Neil, now with our capability, you can tell exactly which threat actor was attacking your organization. How many organizations have you actually seen that would be able to take threat actor data and implement some form of countermeasure control based solely on knowing what a threat actor was?
Yeah, it's not many. To answer the specific question, I'll say not many at all. I think in time we'll have more as people get more mature. But there's really only two reasons to care, in my opinion, about attribution. And I think the challenge we have is most people that are worried about attribution aren't falling into one of these two categories. Attribution for most folks, it's shiny and it's spooky and it's scary and it makes them feel like they're spies and they work at the agency or whatever. And it wows their bosses and it gets them more budget. But it's also really time consuming and a pain, to be honest. So the only two areas I've seen where adversary attribution matters is either you can do something about it, which means you're a government agency or you're law enforcement of some kind. You can actually take legal action. All right, listen, we're not doing hackback. If you're in the private sector and you think that's a good plan, let's have a separate conversation, because I don't. I think that's a good idea.
Right.
So if you have the power and the authority to take action, you want to know who, obviously, and you want some real strong attribution so you don't shoot the wrong people. And the only other reason to do it is proactivity. So, and this is the one that matters to most people and should. The reason I want to know who it is if I understand who they are and I've got a really good understanding of that actor. So let's say I've got a threat actor and I know their entire kill chain and their standard practices. And I've identified they were in my environment and they were in step 3 of the kill chain. I don't know where I should be looking next and see, well, did they get to 4? Did they get to 5? Did they get to 6? Where have they gone in my organization? If I know that actor and we've kicked them out, but we know they're known to be persistent, we know what they're after, perhaps. Maybe we know their motives. And now we know how to harden specific areas. Well, these are this is the data they're really trying to get to. And we've seen them start that process. So we need to either, harden the area there or move the data or, encrypt that area specifically, or other things you might be able to do, right? So I think there's value in knowing the adversary in that regard. So you can know who's dealt with you and who's, and be proactive. If you've completely been had, you might be curious to know who the adversary is, to know where your data went. I'm not sure what the value is at that point. It's going to be a nation state probably, and you're not getting it back. I promise you, if you go on TV and call out one of the nation state actors with great evidence, it won't matter to them. The U.S. government's tried it. It hasn't done much for us. So I don't think you're going to succeed with that. So I think the challenge, though, is that most people who care about attribution care about for the wrong reasons. And I've seen organizations burn a lot of time and energy chasing down, I want to know exactly who this was.
Yes.
And it's just so they can tell the board It's just so they can have a really sexy meeting with the board to say, look how great we are at Intel. But you've wasted time on it. You haven't made yourself any smarter or safer. So if you can't take action and you're not worried about the proactivity piece, which you should be, but if you're not there yet maturity wise, then I don't care who did it. I got to worry about just stopping problems right now. I'll get to the who done it later.
I think I'm really glad you brought up the understanding the kill chain part of it and the path part of it, because I've had this conversation several times with vendors who produce shiny interfaces for their technology, where they drop in these visualizations. And for those who wonder what we're talking about, right? So there's two kind of big frameworks, and I don't have slides for this up right now. Maybe one of the mods can go out in there and look for these two kind of links to kind of share with the folks on stream. We either talk about the kill chain, right, or we talk about the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And so no
love for the diamond model, huh?
No love for the diamond model. I personally believe in, and again, one of the mods can go find the diamond model as well to kind of link that one. So we've got all three, because AJ does got a good point. But I think that without naming any vendor specifically, right, I think that there is a huge focus, and people love to talk about MITRE and talk about the MITRE ATT&CK framework and things like that. But I don't think that, to AJ's point, that they're using the data that they're getting either in their technology stack or in the intelligence that they're getting to place it appropriately in one of the two frameworks, so that they can actually understand, either from a proactive countermeasure perspective or from a countermeasure reinforcement perspective, what they can do to make their organizations, better at defending against those types of attacks.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously agree with that. I mean, that's a challenge we have in industry right now. I think there are folks who don't know the frameworks well enough yet in some cases. In a self-serving plug, obviously, since I do work for a tech company, and this actually rolls up our alley, we have all three of these. That's why I mentioned Diamond. We have all three of these actually in the platform already, and we're driving pretty hard. We're a model-based company specifically because we think that the value is there. There's an advantage of being able to make sense of what you're getting and put it in a framework that you can work with. It's also a good framework for communicating, both at the technical and tactical level with folks, but all the way up the chain. And being able to communicate with leadership and say, this is what we understand about these adversaries and what's happened, or about this activity. So there's a lot of value in it from that standpoint. MITRE ATT&CK is incredibly deep. Mm-hmm. It's very, very good, very powerful, and it is, it supersedes the other models. But it takes time to learn. It's that kind of deep and powerful that you just have to learn it, which is part of the reason we're integrating it in technology.
So let me ask you.
But that's true.
Let me ask you your opinion on this, and this is slightly off topic from intelligence as a whole, but since we're bringing up, MITRE ATT&CK and kill chain, one of the things that I oftentimes tell folks who are asking for differences between the two, or how to talk about the two, is like, if you're wanting to explain, from your perimeter to your host, like all the levels of defense that you have, the defense in depth, and how your technology is protecting you from the edge of your boundary all the way to the host in that form, I think kill chain is better. If you're looking at TTP, or tactic, technique, and procedure specific, types of threats, and you need to understand the very, very detailed and very, very deep things that you need to protect against, either through some type of threat modeling exercise or some type of, adversary simulation exercise, then MITRE helps you in that regard. But they're two vastly different, types of frameworks that help you visualize your defense in depth posture in vastly different ways.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you nailed it, right? I mean, that's exactly right. I find kill chain to be easier. It was designed to be. I mean, it's simpler. It's older at this point too. But if you want to go into the depth you're talking about, I think you do have to go to MITRE ATT&CK at that point. It just takes more time and effort and more understanding of what it is. But I think both are valid. Both are very useful. I've worked with a lot of organizations that are successful with both. And a little anecdote I'll throw in. It's a little self-serving, but before there was kill chain, and a lot of people don't know the history of kill chain, right? So before there was kill chain, there was actually, if you go way back, there was cyber intelligence preparation of the battle space. So intelligence preparation of the battle space, IPB, is a common tactic, been around forever. You got to understand the landscape when you go to a war in a kinetic world. There was cyber intelligence preparation of the battle space, and it became cyber intelligence preparation of the environment, CIPE, because the Secretary of Defense at the time didn't want the cyber to be considered a battle space. And I know this because I happened to be on the team. So I was there when we helped write the original book. And then eventually it was picked up by another contractor, and it became kill chain. They matured it. They did good things. I'm not trying to take away from those guys. But yeah, as luck would have it, I was there and was part of the original team that put that together in the initial cadre that actually taught CIPE to Cyber Command when they were growing up. So it was fun to be there for that. I was also in the room for the Diamond model. I've got my Forrest Gump moment.
Nice.
I take no credit for the Diamond model. Andy Pendergast and those guys get full credit. I was just in the room when there was a whiteboard session and we started chatting up, how are we going to do things better? That was an NTOC challenge we had of how do we better make sense of what we've got and report it in a way that makes sense to leadership. And it evolved into the Diamond model. So yeah, my little Forrest Gump cyber moment, I happen to be involved in the two big frameworks. I have no connection to my MITRE at all, unfortunately.
Yeah. So